and gentlemen, your attention, please.
Just a catching strays over here.
You're in for a hell of a show.
Keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs.
It's time for our main event.
Welcome to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, home of the 2024 Republican National Convention. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're going to have a time here, aren't we, fellas?
I mean, this is amazing. The atmosphere here, the energy, it's incredible. Happy all of you can join us right now.
And with all the events over the last weekend, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, the backdrop of all of that, could the stakes possibly be any higher for a convention?
No, they couldn't be any higher. And what we've seen this year is a campaign of contrast. Do you want the weakness that you see in Joe Biden, or do you want the strength that a real commander-in-chief like Donald Trump provides? When he held that fist up, he made history. And we're going to be talking to our grandkids about that.
If you think about it, fellas, there's a certain poetry about our national experience over the last 48 hours that follows the American story. It's one of tragedy, faith, courage, defiance, ultimately resilience, as we saw, as you mentioned, with that fist. America's always tested, but we've always met that test, and we find leadership in the exact moment we need it most. We're going to attempt to find some of that magic here from this very stage over the next 4 days. Right in front of the Fiserv Arena. Couldn't have a better piece of real estate, and there's no place better to do it than the shores of Lake Michigan on a beautiful July afternoon right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Fellas, I could not be more excited to be here with you and doing this in the big stage.
It's an amazing time for everyone to come together. Like you said, it was a horrific, tragic moment. And then the resilience and the strength that, Donald Trump shows in that moment, just inspiring people, bringing a moment of hope when it's the most dark possible. And then right then you have the convention. It's incredible.
And Holmes, you mentioned leadership, and we're going to get some new leadership here today, imminently. Donald Trump is going to announce his selection for vice president of the United States. We've heard here now rumors, I saw reported on Fox, that Burgum is out, that Rubio is out. There's still some other players around. If you're on the YouTube, and thank you for being on the YouTube, like and subscribe to the channel, but also put there in the comments who you want the pick to be, because we're going to find that out today.
Absolutely. No, we've got a lot of work to do, fellas. We've got a lot of work to do. You're going to see some of the best guests in all of the convention right here on the Ruthless Variety program. One today, maybe he's going to be abbreviated visit here if he's picked. I haven't seen him ruled out. Glenn Youngkin is joining us at some point.
Yeah.
We have Senator Thune. We have Senator Cornyn. We've got incredible guests all week long. We're going to try to get to all of that and more. But I think we have to set the table here for what everybody was feeling and doing here over the last couple days. And the thing that I think is probably the best table setter for this particular convention, one that we did not have any idea was going to be the case last Friday when we were starting to pack up and come here. If we can go to graphic 3, please. Graphic 3, I think you've seen it before. You're going to see it again.
Yeah.
This is one of the most iconic photos that has ever been taken in American history. You agree?
Instant. And what I was saying earlier, we're going to be telling our grandkids about this. We lived through this. We had the luxury of having Donald Trump as president once. We're going to have the luxury of having him as president one more time. And we are very, very fortunate to have that in our country. We need strength right now.
And it comes at such an interesting time. And Smug, I think you pointed this out actually on the ride here, in that when I was talking about America gets the leadership it requires at extremely difficult times, it's no joke to anybody what we've seen in the White House right now. The infirm President Biden, basically nobody, I don't care how partisan of a Democrat you are, nobody has real confidence that guy's answering the phone at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Right? And the contrasting of that with what we saw right there in that photo is a meaningful psychological development upon the American people.
And you think like on the world stage, you think around the world, in every other country, every other world leader for the past few weeks, all they've been seeing from America is we have a president who can't make it through a debate, who then has a press conference where he's still incoherent, who then shows up to NATO and is saying Vice President Trump that he shows weakness. And then you have this horrific moment, and then right then, President Trump rises to the occasion. And I mean, in that moment, we were discussing on the way here, it puts everyone on notice around the world. Strength is on its way back.
We're back, baby.
And that's such an important thing, Smug, I think, that you mentioned there. Look, that raised fist, blood coming down Donald Trump's face, coming back up, the resilience of that image, I think, is hopefully a launch pad for everything we're going to see in this building behind us here over the next 4 days. It's an opportunity for Donald Trump to unite this country.
Yeah.
And if you look at all the Americans out there who are angry, right? This is an opportunity to show them that we have an agenda that's going to put the country on the right track.
No question about it, Smash.
No, I think that's exactly right. And one of the things that you said, Smug, that I think is so important is that it sends a message around the world. It wasn't just to American voters, but it puts everybody on notice. People who do not like our country are now on notice that on January the 20th at noon, when Donald Trump is sworn in as president once again, their fun is over. He is there to keep this world safe. He's unified our country, and he is actually going to do what Joe Biden never could.
No question about it. Once again, I'm Josh Holmes, comfortably smug. Michael Duncan and John Ashbrook there on the end, coming to you live for 4 days here, 2 to 4, local time, Central Time. But fellas, I was struck over the last couple of days, planning to come here and how we were going to organize the show, what we were going to talk about, what a different turn everything took. I mean, look, it's not a secret. Over the last 3 weeks, it's been going pretty well for the Republican Party. It's been going pretty poorly for Democrats. They tried their very best over the last 3 weeks to try to dislodge a guy who they think is on a trajectory to lose this presidency in President Biden, and they've come out. You've had the Obama stuff. We've talked about this a lot on the show. That we thought was going to be the core focus of all of this, of just how elated Republicans were by this opportunity. And now tragedy strikes. You have this resilient moment. It adds on top of it. It's a little bit of a different texture.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is you'd had weeks of Democrat infighting. The story was nothing but, okay, are Democrats going to keep this guy? This guy doesn't look like he can handle the job. Is he going to even make it through his, term as president? And then on a second, this entire story becomes, wow, look how strong Trump is. Look at that message that he sent. And then, I mean, you get these, of course, blind quotes from Democrat, whether they're elected Democrats, whether they're Democrat operatives, being like, it's over. It's completely over.
Which is an amazing thing, right? I mean, this is, and don't be fooled, right? I mean, they're going to put absolutely everything they can into it, whether they're dealing with the cadaver or whether they're dealing with something else. They're ultimately going to be dealing with everything they can throw at Donald Trump. They have to take a pause. I found it hilarious today. MSNBC took Morning Joe off the air for one day only because they were actually afraid that they would be impolitic, shall we say, to be courteous about it.
It's crazy, and I mean that speaks so much to the hatred and the divisiveness that for so long the left has sown, and we're seeing the results of that. The hatred and how much they've made this country divided, of how much they've demonized conservatives, how much they've demonized Donald Trump, and now they're paying the price for it. They're seeing that the American people do not want that.
I think it's such an opportunity for Donald Trump. He talks a lot about keeping America safe on the campaign trail, and that's everything from immigration to crime in cities and things like that. It's like, who are you going to trust to keep America safe? Mm-hmm. The cadaver who can't talk unless he's on a teleprompter, or a guy who literally took a bullet last weekend for what he believes and what he's willing to fight for.
Yeah, and jumped up and yelled, fight, fight, fight.
Right.
Incredible. Right?
And let's remember, this guy is a billionaire. He doesn't have to be doing this.
Yeah.
He didn't have to subject himself to all of this, like all of the lawfare and the Democrats investigating everything about him and everything about his family. He didn't have to subject himself to taking a bullet for this country, but he did. And I think that makes him a very special figure at this point in history. It's exactly what people want in a president, because it's something that we do not have right now.
I think that's really well said, because look, nobody's born a hero, right? There are circumstances that bring heroism together at the right place in the right time with the right person. And we've seen this throughout American history. We have divine providence in a lot of different ways. And every time we've needed and required steadfast leadership, regardless of what you think of the person before that moment, in that moment, it is exactly what you need. And at a moment when most Americans are feeling pretty down about where we are as a country domestically, fearing we're losing our culture, fear their pocketbooks with inflation and everything else. You look around the world, you feel like you're not being represented well, and our allies are feeling like, is America on the decline? China advancing everywhere, Russia not caring what it is that we do. There's just this malaise that has set in. And all of a sudden, regardless of what it is that you thought about Donald Trump 3 years ago, 2 years ago, even 6 months ago, you find somebody who's got the energy to represent what a resurgence in the American ideal looks like. And that's, I think, the opportunity that he has at this convention over the next 4 days.
So over the weekend, I saw this great tweet from David Sachs. He's an incredible businessman. And he said he had a family member at that rally. And he said when those gunshots went out, it was fear, panic, pandemonium. And then moments later, they saw Donald Trump rise again, put his fist in the air. And he said it was like a light switch turned on. People felt hope. People felt united. They started chanting USA. And he said his family member said they'd never experienced or seen something like that. I want that energy here. This week, if we can carry that forward, it would be incredible.
Fellas, I think we have a little bit of news here on the Variety program. We like to do these things live.
Yeah.
It turns out there is a truth out there, President Trump's version of X, indicating that J.D. Vance is going to be the next vice president of the United States. Huh?
Wow.
This is a very, very interesting deal. First of all, you called it like 3 days ago.
Well, that's the thing is I appreciate I want to apologize for not being able to keep a lid on it, but the selection itself is terrific. I mean, talk about an energetic person to bring aboard. And again, the contrast. You talk about a contrast between the tickets. J.D. Vance is young, dynamic, exciting, inspiring. And then you look at the other side, and it's like the Gong Show. It's like a laughing stock.
Right. He's also, and you guys are going to give me a hard
Here
time
we
for saying
go.
this.
Here we go.
We're talking about Ohio.
He's also from Ohio. Not only is he from Ohio, he's from a place called Middletown, Ohio, which is a city adjacent to where I grew up. He's a poor kid. And when is the last time that a poor kid from a small town in the Midwest had that kind of influence over the executive branch of our government? It's about time that we have that. And I'm so thrilled that Trump has chosen J.D. Vance. I mean, he's been a leader in the Senate, rising star. He has so much energy. And think about the contrast between J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris. The woman can't get a sentence out, and J.D. Vance makes great points. We're going to talk about this later on in the show. But one of the things that he talked about over the weekend was when he said that America is more than just an idea. We're actually a nation. We're a nation of people who need to be defended. It's so much more than what Democrats suggest it is, and I'm glad that we've got a guy who can articulate that on the ticket.
Well, you're all going to get to know him very well over the next few months. I will say, just as a Variety program, you'll recall, longtime listeners will remember, we had him on before he was an announced Senate candidate.
That's right.
Talking about the speculation. I actually, believe it or not, tried to recruit him to run for Senate back in 2018, unsuccessfully. He wasn't ready for it at the time. Author of Hillbilly Elegy, of course, a New York Times best-selling book, I think really changed the way a lot of people think about Appalachia and poverty in America. Outside of what the mainstream media tells you is like the most underserved communities. He was like, well, here's one you never talk about. And let me tell you a little bit about my own experience. An incredibly moving story that's since obviously made a big movie out of it. But I got to know him a little bit during that process. There is going to be an attempt to try to demonize him and try to explain what it is that he believes in words outside of his own mouth, right? But having spent a little bit of time around him, and I think you guys know this too, this is an individual who's extremely smart. I mean, Yale guy, right? So, like Luke Thompson notwithstanding, there's some pretty smart people that come out of that joint. And I think ultimately this is going to be a guy who shows a different part of that ticket, as you said. He's younger. He's got a ton of energy. He certainly comes from a very different place than Manhattan, New York. And he has got this just sort of energy that I think people are going to find contagious. I
think he reinforces one of the key planks of what America First is, and that is, the forgotten man.
Yeah.
Right.
The person from the industrial Midwest who maybe their job got outsourced overseas to China. I think he adds that intellectual heft to the ideas that Donald Trump has talked about since he walked down the golden escalator. Right. So I think that's going to be a huge benefit for Donald Trump, especially in that blue wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, that Republicans need to flip if they want to get to 270.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good point, right? Because the map is very condensed at this point. And Democrats, you heard them say it out of their own mouths, the only pathway to victory at this point, they're not even dealing with like Georgia and Nevada and Arizona. They're like, the only pathway that we have to victory is right through that blue wall. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, they're not even dealing with Ohio. That's a very narrow, sort of inside straight road to 270. This is a guy who lives that experience.
That's exactly right. And most people, when they think of those states, they think of the big cities. They think Detroit, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Cincinnati. Those states are made up of small cities just like Middletown, Ohio. And when he talks with authority about what life is like in those small cities, people from across those states can relate in a way that they never could to any candidate who's ever been on the ticket before. And I mean, I'm telling you, he is such an asset to this ticket. So I'm just thrilled.
Oh, no question about it. I will say before we've got a great guest coming up, Senator John Cornyn. He's one of his colleagues. You can talk about that and a whole range of other issues. We also want to talk to him a little bit about the court decision that came out.
Yeah.
I mean, on the way here, we figured out, wow, there's some actually game-breaking news. Amazing how this has happened over the last 3 weeks. But the weather is a little better than last time we were here.
Oh.
As opposed to like 105 degrees, it's about 93.
Absolutely. Well, without further ado, we'd love to welcome up Senator John Cornyn. He is just an absolute treasure of a human being. He is the senior senator from the great state of Texas. How are you, sir?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for coming on, Senator.
Honored.
This is we're doing it all live here. We're doing it all live.
Okay.
And this is terrific for him to take a little time out of it. I know he's been traversing all around the media row and making sure that we've got all our bases covered, but you're a busy man these days.
I was visiting this morning with the Alabama delegation and saw my colleague Tommy Tuberville out there, and I heard Katie Britt's going to be speaking to the convention as a larger group, so she was polishing up her remarks. But it's fun to be here with such a great, enthusiastic crowd, and the events of the last few hours.
Yeah.
The last few days have been nothing short of historic.
Yeah, I want to get your reaction to that. Obviously, there's a few moments. You've been around for
a while,
as long as I have, and you've seen incredible things, right? I mean, moments where everything stops, right? Financial crisis, 9/11, talking about COVID, the onset of COVID, things like that. I felt like another one of those moments happened Saturday evening where everything you thought going into this that were sort of the parameters by which we were playing politics changed in an instant.
Yeah, it did. I'm old enough to remember the John F. Kennedy assassination. I was in middle school. Ronald Reagan was shot by John Hinckley, and those are moments when like getting slapped in the face, and you sort of begin to say, well, this has gotten out of control, and maybe something needs to change. I found it rather ironic that President Biden said we need to tone down the conversation when they said Donald Trump's election will be the end of democracy.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, to me, the end of democracy comes when our most basic institutions like the FBI, like the Department of Justice, like our legal system has become weaponized.
Yeah.
I mean, these should be neutral institutions that protect us by making sure the law's impartially enforced. But as we know now, there's a new term called lawfare, which I'd never heard of before until recently, but it's basically weaponizing our legal system. And of course, President Trump has been the victim of that for a long time now.
No question about it. I actually want to get into that. People probably don't know you were a judge before you were a senator.
I'm a recovering judge. Yes.
Steeped in the law. I remember my first few days in the Senate when you'd take to the microphone of the Judiciary Committee, I couldn't even understand what you were talking about because it was like so steeped in precedent and legalese. I was like, man, I got to learn this
I
stuff.
think most of the words were in Latin. That's a problem.
But let's get your reaction because, of course, there was a huge announcement out of Miami today.
Yeah.
The documents case, which I think almost all legal observers believed was the one that people needed to keep an eye on because it was not just obviously attached to January 6th or what the nonsense that was going on up in New York. It had a separate set of facts that they were dealing with individually. Judge ruled today that the appointment of Jack Smith was unconstitutional in and of itself as a special prosecutor, threw the whole thing out. Curious your thoughts about that.
Well, we've never had these many criminal charges whirling about involving a president or a candidate for president of the United States. So I think that's caused this issue that's been sort of kicked around for years about the legality of the independent counsel system. Your former boss, my friend Mitch McConnell, has reminded me that in, I think it was 1999, both political parties essentially let the independent counsel authority lapse because it had become weaponized. But now the special counsel, which is supposed to be independent but reports to the Attorney General, I don't think it was lost on anybody that this person appointed by Joe Biden's Attorney General was pursuing criminal charges against his opponent in the next election. I mean, the Department of Justice is supposed to stay out of politics, and I think we've seen a corruption, frankly, of these institutions in a way that's very troubling. But I do ultimately have faith in the system to work it out, and I think this is a beginning of that. We'll see. It's the appointments clause. I mean, Jack Smith was not confirmed to any office.
Right.
So under the appointments clause, you can't serve unless you have been. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, that won't be decided before the election.
And there's no constitutional footnote for being able to prosecute your political opponent, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, these are bizarre times we're living in.
They really are. They really are. But look, feels like things are looking up politically, that Republicans are incredibly united in this moment. I mean, like anytime you're out of power, that's a process that takes place. But we didn't know what to expect. You have this horrible event on Saturday. You come to what I thought everybody would be dancing in the streets here for the Republican National Convention because everybody's just so excited about the political prospects that we now find ourselves in. But, you don't know how that sort of butts up against the tragedy that took place on Saturday. But I think what we've found is people are incredibly motivated.
Yeah.
And it seemed like, I mean, look, you can tell me in Texas, I got to imagine people are pretty fired up.
Yeah, well, I think people realize that our country is at stake. We talked a little bit about the institutions like the FBI, Department of Justice, and the court system. These are things that distinguish us from other countries that call themselves democracies around the world, our adherence to the rule of law. And being a recovering judge, I happen to believe that those institutions are absolutely basic to who we are. So I understand why that people are worried about the future and what's at stake. We've had 4 years of disastrous policies at the border. We're no longer feared by our adversaries, nor do our friends feel like they can trust us. And then we've seen 40-year high inflation, which President Biden, for some reason, decided to call Bidenomics. I thought that was kind of a big mistake to me. Why own it? But he embraced it wholeheartedly.
Nice when your political opponent puts the old negative bumper sticker on their own liabilities, right?
Love it.
Saves a little sign work.
One of those institutions that sort of defines who we are as a country is the United States Senate, as you know very well. And we're here talking about the race for the White House. But there is a race for the Senate that is just as important as the race for the White House in many ways.
Yes.
And it seems like, of course, we all know the Democrats have the majority right now, but it seems like Republicans have a really good shot at taking the majority this fall. You've got a big race in Texas, your colleague, Senator Ted Cruz, and there are a bunch of other races across the map. Do you feel confident that we can get it?
Well, as you know, a third of the Senate races are up every 2 years, but the Democrats have a tough hand when the best prospects they have are in Florida and Texas against incumbents. So I told my friend Ted Cruz, I said, the good news is, Ted, you're going to win. The bad news is it'll be the most expensive Senate race in Texas history. He actually holds that honor already from 2018.
Two-time champion.
Two-time champion.
But he's going to surpass that. But, Steve Daines, who has my old job and Mitch McConnell's old job as
did it twice.
Chairman of the Senatorial Committee. There's two things that the chairman does, as you know. It's to recruit candidates and it's raise money. Yeah. And Steve has done a magnificent job working with the Trump campaign to try to make sure that President Trump endorsed candidates who could actually win a general election. And so I'm very optimistic. But I'm also been through enough elections to know it's too easy to pop the cork on the champagne. We still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. No question about it, Smug.
Yeah, so another area I think you could give us some expertise is we just got the news that President Trump has selected J.D. Vance, your colleague in the Senate, for his VP. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a small world. J.D. Vance was my law clerk.
Wow.
In the Senate Judiciary Committee
when
he was at Yale Law School.
Wow.
And that's before he became famous and wrote Hillbilly Elegy. Yeah. So good for JD. Obviously, he's a very smart, well-spoken guy. And, we got to recognize the fact that both the Democratic nominee and the Republican nominee are not youngsters anymore. Yeah. And so I think JD can help the ticket by speaking to a new generation of voters. And so I'm fired up. I'm ready to call him Mr. Vice President.
Yeah, I mean, picking somebody out of the conference, no less.
Yeah, well, and that means, of course, I guess it means that they'll have a special election in Ohio. I can't remember what the law is there.
Yeah, I think DeWine.
Or Governor DeWine gets to choose.
Yeah, he'll make an appointment, and there'll be a special after.
Well, thankfully, Ohio has become redder and redder in recent years, so I think that should be a relatively safe seat.
The fact that he was your law clerk, I mean, you got to imagine there's some special access that comes along with it.
I hope so. I hope so.
Think you took
and maybe a little deference, No, I think JD hasn't been in the Senate that long, but he's developed relationships with the senators there, and on a bipartisan basis. I know he's worked even on some rail safety stuff with Sherrod Brown, and so. That's the main role of the vice president, to preside over the Senate and to be a liaison to the legislative branch. And we're going to have a incredibly heavy lift come January, pass a budget, do reconciliation, deal with $3 trillion of potential tax increases. But we can't stop there. And so I think it's a magnificent opportunity. And I'm excited for JD and excited for our ticket and looking forward to his election.
That's great. Well, before we let you go, obviously that's the magnificent lift that you've got. You're seeking to lead that magnificent work that's going to be done in the United States Senate, confirming nominees and whatever. You're running for leader.
I am. I've worked closely with Mitch McConnell the whole time I've been in the Senate. I call him the master of the Senate. LBJ's got nothing on him. And I've learned about everything I know about how to be effective in the Senate, both in the minority and the majority. So Mitch decided to hang up his spurs, and I thought, well, I'd like to use my experience and what I've learned from him and others to help our conference. I do believe that it's going to be a historic time. And so many important issues, whether it's national security, whether it's our fiscal condition, whether we're spending more money on interest on the national debt than on defense now.
That's incredible.
And then, so I'd like to put that to work, and we'll see what happens. As you know, Josh, it's a secret ballot.
Yeah.
And as I was told by one of my former Senate colleagues, senators will lie to you. So I think it was Lamar Alexander who told me he wrote 27 thank you notes for 24 votes.
Yeah, that's about right.
So we'll see what happens. And it's the good news is it's not personal. John Thune's a good man. Rick Scott worked with both of them, and we'll see what the conference decides on. It's been a long time since we've had to start from scratch in terms of electing a new leader, but something I'd like to try.
Yeah, well, no question. You've been an incredibly effective conservative leader for this country, in the great state of Texas. I can't thank you enough for spending a little bit of time with us in your busy schedule, and hopefully we'll catch up with you over the next few days.
This is fun. Have me back sometime.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Good to
Thank
see
you
you,
so
Senator.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, it's a incredible moment here when we've got guys like John Cornyn walking by the booth.
Right.
Tap his brain for what is, incredible amount of experience in actually getting things done. This is a legislator's legislator.
Yeah, you can get the news that J.D. Vance has been picked for VP, and then 90 seconds later get one of his Senate colleagues here on stage.
Yeah, and he was his law clerk, no less. How about that?
Unbelievable.
Great
didn't
data
even know
point.
that.
I didn't know it either.
All right, so we're going to go to a little topic here, a little topic change while we're working through some things. You may have noticed over the last few days that the Democrats are in a little bit of a disarray.
A little endless stages of disarray.
So, but the funniest thing about us watching this disarray is typically they work in concert with the corporate media, right? And where all of these things, this is what we think, and then they go out and are the mouthpiece for all of it.
Yeah.
But when they have no real direction, or they have taken all of their best stuff and tried to use it against Joe Biden to try to get him out of the race, and it didn't work, like they're all sort of scrambled and they don't know. So you see a lot of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, they do crazy stuff no matter what, but this is really crazy stuff. So we would pull together some of the most incredible headlines over the last, few days, 24, 48 hours. Let's go to graphic 4, if you wouldn't mind, folks, if we can pull that up. MAGA responds with outrage after Donald Trump injured at Pennsylvania rally.
What the?
Can't make it up. And it's Newsweek, and there's a guy there, Josh Hammer, who is very talented. But for the rest of the organization, it's like you don't even want to pick this up when it's on the counter at Jiffy Lube. For crying out loud.
Well, is it? I don't even. They have a hard copy of that rag?
Well, maybe they don't have it.
I don't think so.
But
I mean, that's like laying next to life. I mean, for real, I just don't have any idea. But that is something. That's something else. Because we always talk about, the Republican seize, pounce, whatever. It's never about the underlying stuff that's going on. It's about the Republican reaction to the stuff that's going on that somehow sugarcoats any sort of lib involvement in any of it.
Yeah, it's like that Norm Macdonald joke, like if ISIS dropped a nuclear weapon on Washington, what would be the reaction against peaceful Muslims? It's like there's nothing, anything bad that happens to Republicans somehow becomes our fault, sort of thing.
It's just truly unbelievable that this horrific, tragic moment, they say, wow, Republicans pounce at someone trying to murder their candidate.
Well, and we all know here that this is entirely fraudulent, right? I mean, these are people who say that Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy. They call him Hitler.
Yeah. Right.
The New Republic just had a magazine cover-up that has him with the Adolf Hitler face from before he rose to power in Germany. Well, which is it?
Yeah.
Because you don't say thoughts and prayers to Adolf Hitler.
Right.
Right.
You
You don't hope for a recovery from Adolf Hitler after his attempted assassination. So which part of it is fake? The fact that he's an existential threat to democracy, right? Or the fact that you're giving him thoughts and prayers?
Well, they've been pushing the envelope for way too long, and I think over the weekend was a little bit of a wake-up call. I don't know that they're necessarily going to change their behavior broadly, but they were scared enough by what their people might say that they took Morning Joe off the air this morning, which is what we talked about. And, what we have heard from the left is it's not just one magazine that called him Hitler. Every single day they're saying that he will end democracy. And there are people out there like Dan Goldman, who's a Democrat in the House, saying that we need to end him.
Yes.
And they have the most violent rhetoric walking right up and across the line. And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. Some guy who's a lunatic that's completely separate from society actually carried out what we suggested that he should carry out. Like, what they have said is so dangerous. And then when you call them on it, they're like, whoa, Republicans say bad things too.
Oh yeah.
You've seen this online.
To me, that was what was so outraging is, for the longest time, they pushed this message, literally saying that if Trump wins, it's the end of America, right? And so then you have this lunatic act on what they've been feeding the public for years now, right? And it's like the meme, they're like, we're all trying to find the guy who did this.
Yeah. Right.
And it's like, well, Joe Biden's just been on TV how many times saying that if President Trump wins, it's the end of the republic. If President Trump wins,
it isn't just a lunatic lone wolf here. This sort of delusion goes to the highest echelons of the Democratic Party. I saw over the weekend that the political advisor to Reid Hoffman, who's one of the largest Democratic donors in America, put out this email to other, liberal financiers talking about how this was a false flag operation, perhaps.
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
No, it's a mental illness.
That Donald Trump gets shot in the ear, people died, and this guy is sending to people who have hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, maybe this was all fake.
I mean, it's a mental illness.
Yeah.
it is.
Which we've seen, it's pervasive, though, at this point. What I find so fascinating about it is that Democrats and the media have treated Republicans, anybody sort of right of center, as a zoo animal over the last 3 or 4 years, right? And they attribute any sort of negative rhetoric. It doesn't matter who. I mean, there's a think tank that put out a white paper on what they think the agenda ought to be, and all of a sudden they're tackling Donald Trump with it.
Yeah.
Pretending like he authored it, right? Everything's by indirection.
Right.
So, like, the most offensive thing that any conservative, self-identified, anywhere in this country has to say, they're like, see, that's why January 6th happened, right? And they're ultimately trying to get Republicans to own all of that. And yet, at the same time, all of these folks, individually and specifically, have done this. And mainstream, I mean, we're talking about mainstream, cable news, front page of newspapers. They're gaslighting people into believing all of this absolutely crazy stuff about Donald Trump, that he's somehow going to ruin democracy.
Yeah, but you know what though? I mean, they have to scrape the bottom of the barrel. They got nothing else.
They do have nothing else.
The reality right now is their candidate is a cadaver. Half of the Democratic primary electorate doesn't want him to be the nominee.
Yeah.
They're so demoralized. You've got leaders in the House and the Senate trying to convince this guy to get off the ticket. So of course they're pulling out TPS reports from think tanks and being like, Donald Trump's a threat to America, because there's nothing else they can do.
Hell, it's not just TPS reports from think tanks. They literally, on the front page of the LA Times, the morning after there was an assassination attempt on an American leader, first of all, they didn't say anything about assassination, but above the headline about President Trump was Project 2025. Yeah. They cannot help themselves.
I mean,
they
think
can't
about
help
that.
themselves.
It's like, D-Day, and then like putting in a subheader and being like, what? You should hear about these Republicans. So let's pop up another graphic. This is graphic 5. There was a whole bunch. I don't know how we picked on this one, but there were so many of them in this exact thing. Trump's speech interrupted by Secret Service.
Oh.
There was one that was like,
CNN!
Yeah. Oh, it was just a Secret Service interruption.
It's not just like a blog.
it's like, I mean, we were watching it. You watched it, right? I mean, it wasn't, what didn't seem like a mystery to everybody. They wanted further due diligence on that. No due diligence was necessary on a whole range of things, but this one we're going to have to spend.
Well, like the kid, for example. Remember that kid who was standing in on the National Mall, and CNN just bum rushed him and said that he was a racist and every terrible thing about him right away they didn't check in to see if the FBI verified his racism.
Right.
They just ran with the headline.
Well,
and they can't say that somebody tried to shoot at the president of the United States.
Yeah. How exactly did they think he got that blood on his ear?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it also, it's so funny because now we are days removed from that attack, and the media is talking about, well, we're still trying to figure out what the ideology of this guy was. It's a real open question what his motivation was. I think his motivation was he wanted to kill Donald Trump.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty clear.
Pretty clear?
Yeah.
That seems pretty clear. Let's throw up one more of these, graphic 6. So this one is Republicans play shooting in Trump's narrative of persecution. What?
I mean, this is just so unreal.
Again, that's from today. Is that New York Times?
I think that's New York Times.
But this is
That's NPR. Yeah.
It looks,
Or maybe Washington Post.
I don't know, we'll get some clarity on this, but this is the kind of thing that drives me more nuts than anything in the world, and that we're dealing with, again, a Republican pounce narrative. What do you mean? This is one of the 5 moments in the lives of anybody who's 40 or under.
Right.
You will remember for the rest of your life.
Right. You're going to be telling your kids about it.
It's the Times. We can confirm it is the Times. So great work of the New York Times. They also, by the way, did you see the big Sunday insert that they threw in?
I did.
They had this big Sunday insert that they did, like the case against Donald Trump and what a danger he is. And like obviously that takes months to try to put together, and they did that. But like today was the day.
Yeah.
And so they sent it to print, and out it went. And so, like, literally the day after
Couldn't wait.
an attempted assassination, they I don't know what the logistics are, right? But I'm just saying, if I ran that paper, you'd have to run me over with a delivery truck,
Right.
to get that thing out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you do anything. You just stop. You'd be like, today we're not selling
Yeah.
the paper.
Yeah, but you know what,
Today
Holmes?
we're not selling
day.
it.
What Ashbrook always says, I think, is true. If you think some of these reporters are bad, the editors are even worse.
Yeah.
These are the people with the agenda
They
that
don't
want to
wa-
have the news setting.
Yeah, they don't want you to know their name so that they can guide the paper toward the left and nobody is going to attack them for it. I mean, what the New York Times did with that headline, that this is about a narrative, showed exactly why people are signing off from their website, because people open a newspaper for information. They don't open a newspaper to get a sermon from someone they don't agree with. They're not interested in that. And that's why everybody is tuning into shows like ours, shows like other friends of ours who are doing the exact same thing, because they want information. They don't want to be told what to think.
And to me, like, the gall of that headline, when they say, oh, Republicans are trying to put this attempted assassination, along with the persecution narrative of Trump. It's like, they tried to kill a guy. You don't
Right.
think that's a kind of
Right.
a horrible thing?
Right.
And then at the same time, you see journalists being like, I was at this rally, and you know what? Some people started shouting at us after that, and I hope you people recognize how tough it is
Right.
to be a journalist. You realize someone was murdered there, and someone
Right.
tried to kill Donald Trump? Like, you weren't the one being persecuted at that rally. I'm surprised you can't realize that if someone dies and you have the presidential candidate almost murdered, that you're not the victim here, and the story's not about you.
Because they're Democrats, they take it upon themselves to try to soften the landing for any Democrat in a difficult situation. And sometimes they really need to dial it down, because I'm telling you, they lost so many subscribers. They lost so many readers this weekend alone.
Yeah.
Well, media is clearly changing, as evidenced by this little piece of real estate for the variety program.
Right.
How about this, huh, fellas?
Right.
I mean, this is something else. We're like sitting right in the middle of this square. You've got Media Row, like basically behind us.
Yeah. I mean, I think they can see like a little bit of our view.
Yeah.
But it's great to see, it was like Ashbrook said, we've got friends like Megyn Kelly, what we do here, and it's because the mainstream media has become an opinion section of where the Democrat Party stands.
Right.
And it's because they lost the respect and the trust of the public that they find themselves in a situation that they couldn't even push out Joe Biden.
I mean, and look at what's happening with Joe Biden, right? I mean, the mainstream media for months and months and months, and frankly years, covered up for the fact that this guy has dementia, and that he's going senile, and he can't put two words together. And what do they say? It's a stutter. Right.
Yeah.
Stutter.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is why I find this thing is so hilarious when people are like, oh my gosh. I mean, we have led maybe 200 programs.
Yeah.
Maybe 200 different shows with a quote from Joe Biden, and then we laugh and we laugh.
Yeah.
And it's like we are absolutely not in this guy's living room.
Yeah.
It was pretty evident to us for over a year and a half, 2 years.
Well,
This is-
that was the funniest thing.
Yeah.
The night of the debate is turning on CNN or MSNBC, and it's like they found out that there's gambling at Rick's. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Like we hadn't all seen it for years with our own eyes and ears.
That is, I mean, that's truly the most incredible part. And then they spent a week trying to the wool's been pulled over our eyes.
Yeah.
We are victims too.
Yeah,
We're putting this in our persecution narrative.
It's like, no, maybe they were right all along, right? I mean, it would do some good. I think Hugh Hewitt said the other day it would do some good if you just listen to the Ruthless Variety program.
Yeah.
We'd give you a little insight into these things every now and then.
And there's just so much to be said. The loss of credibility, the journalist response being actually, we were lied to, And then they realize that they can't push Biden out, and they're like, now what do we do? I mean, they're all out of ideas on the other side. They've tried lying. They've tried saying he's a threat to democracy, and there's literally no power that can keep Trump down.
They got nothing going. But we got a lot going on the Ruthless Variety program. We have Senator John Thune, the whip of the Senate Republican Conference, coming up right after these incredible messages. Thanks again to all of our sponsors in making this happen, because we wouldn't be able to do it without them. So we'll be back right after this.
The last few years have been really tough on my family. This never-ending cycle of inflation is taking more and more out of my paycheck. Hardworking families like mine are hurting. We need help and relief from rising costs. Why aren't we harnessing more of America's natural resources to help reduce inflation? We can't afford to wait any longer. We need more energy and more choices now. Learn more at lightsonenergy.com.
52 million Americans own crypto. These are entrepreneurs, innovators, and job creators who are deeply invested in building a strong America that dominates this emerging technology sector. This year, the official Republican Party platform even pledges support for American crypto owners. Stand with Crypto is mobilizing the crypto community to have an impact on issues and elections. With all the close races across the country, crypto voters could be the difference between winning and losing in November. Find out more and see where your candidates stand in your area at standwithcrypto.org.
Hey folks, my friends at Americans for Prosperity are again on the front lines fighting against the border crisis. It's clear the politicians aren't going to solve this on their own. It's going to take good old-fashioned grassroots activism, and that's what AFP specializes in. Americans for Prosperity Foundation has taken hundreds of concerned citizens to see the border for themselves, turning them into informed activists. And Americans for Prosperity knows just what we need: more border agents, more walls, and more technology. That's what makes Americans for Prosperity unique. They do the tough work of organizing and mobilizing everyday Americans to make a difference. In fact, they just announced a major campaign to hold Biden and his allies accountable for the crisis at the border. Learn more at secureborder.secureamerica.com. That's secureborder.secureamerica.com.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But DC politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
Well, we're back here from the 2024 Republican National Convention here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We found this handsome devil wandering around the promenade, and we thought we'd see what he has to say and what his thoughts are on everything that's going on here. We're gonna let him work through some stuff with the. There it is.
There we go.
There it is. Good to go. Senator John Thune, thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Josh, nice to be with you on this warm day in Milwaukee.
Yeah, it is a little bit warm. Although last time we were here, and I think you were too.
Yes.
For that debate, it was like 106.
It was. I think it was. Yeah, it was hotter then and more humid. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'll take this.
Yeah.
There's a little breeze blowing here, and so.
But it's nice to be in the Midwest, huh? Nice to get the recognition from the national media and the national parties and everybody else.
I know it's not often that you guys are all out here. And, more importantly, the national media. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we're spitting distance from where we need to be in South Dakota anyway.
You are close, and of course we want to, as you know, Josh, we want to get you out there. So just say when you want to bring the show.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So I want to start, obviously, with your reactions the last 48 hours. Clearly, the table setting that we thought was happening over the last 3 weeks with Democrats sort of in disarray, a real split in their conference about whether or not they even wanted Joe Biden to run again, and that continues. But we thought that was going to be the table stakes of what we were dealing with this convention and the backdrop. Clearly, the last 48 hours with the tragedy that happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, has changed an awful lot of that. Just want to get your reactions to it off the top.
Right, and I think that the Democrats are still in disarray. But clearly what happened in the last 48 hours is going to shape forever, probably, what happens in the next 4 or 5 months. And I think that, that as we gather here, I think Republicans are especially united. I mean, there are a lot of, through the years we've had our differences of opinion on some things, and Republicans are kind of the entrepreneurial party, have some very independent views, but the one thing I think that is going to unite us is the importance of changing the direction of the country and replacing an administration that is completely out of touch with the key issues that people care about. And I think that's, the economy, inflation, the border, those are issues I think people are going to vote on. And I think that's why the Democrats, even though, everybody talks about Biden, his age, et cetera, agree on all that. But at the end of the day, I think people are going to vote their pocketbooks, and that's good for us. And of course, President Trump coming through like he did on Saturday, and now us all being here in Milwaukee, I think there's going to be a particularly unified party coming out of this that I hope will help us not only win the White House, but the Senate and hang on to the House.
Yeah, it seems like a tone change just amongst grassroots folks that we've run into here. I mean, everybody was highly motivated coming into here, and I think more unified than anybody would have imagined. But now there is like a unifying force well beyond the partisan, where it feels like people are really trying to bring in center right, center left. Let's just move forward as a country because we're in a dangerous spot at this point.
Right, and that's as has been pointed out by Steve Daines and others. Obviously you've got to have those really hardcore pro-Trump voters, but I think this weekend the president really rallied not only, I would say, all Republicans around the country, but I think a lot of independents and some discerning Democrats too. Yeah. I think you're going to see a very united front, and I think it could be a very big year. Unfortunate as those circumstances are, but and I hope at least this week we can present a front coming out of this convention that hopefully not only can unite just Republicans, but can unite the entire country.
Yeah, great point.
And speaking of uniting Republicans, we just got the announcement that your Senate colleague, J.D. Vance, has been tapped by President Trump to be the VP on the ticket. I want to get your reaction. You've worked with him before.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm looking forward to debates between J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris. I mean, I want to, wherever the sports betting place is around here, I want to put some money down on that one because I think he'll crush her. And he is very articulate. He is very smart, and he will be a terrific messenger for the team. And there was a lot of speculation around this and some good options.
Yeah,
really good.
Yeah,
options.
right.
The president couldn't have gone wrong, and really with the people that were at least on that final list. But JD's a strong pick, and he is somebody who relates to, I think, and connects with audiences out there that sort of broaden our coalition. The middle of the country, those folks that feel like they've been underrepresented in our politics and perhaps haven't had a voice. He is a voice for them, and they are a part of the Republican coalition.
Oh, no question about it. It's interesting. I was saying earlier, we tried to recruit him for Senate first in 2018 after Hillbilly Elegy. He was at the top of the New York Times bestseller list, and he had some other things to do at the time. Wanted to examine his options. Obviously got in and became a senator. But this is somebody, obviously, look, your depth chart of who Trump was picking from, a lot of Senate options.
Yeah, there were.
Right?
This is true. I know. And we're a little worried, Josh, too, because a lot of those Senate options who didn't get the VP job could get cabinet positions. So it's, we don't want to deplete the ranks too much here. And these are all picks and states that we're going to keep our majority. That seat in Ohio, obviously, will be up. I think the state law there, that's a couple of years before they would have a vote on it. It'll be appointment for a while, but it's important that he put together a good team, and JD really enhances that, and he has a lot of confidence in him. And it sounds like for some time that's kind of been where the president's been leaning as he's worked through his options.
Well, if you're depleting the ranks for President Trump's cabinet, you're also adding to them this election cycle. I mean, It seems like Republicans have a really good chance of not just taking the Senate, but also maybe building a little bit of a cushion in the majority. And so I'm wondering, you look out at these states, and I know you've been to a lot of them. You've been traveling the country. Where do you think our best pickup opportunities might be?
Well, it is a big map, Mike, and it's a great slate of candidates. So I was just chatting, and I think you guys were over here. Eric Hovde, the candidate here in Wisconsin, terrific candidate.
We're trying to get him to chug a beer with Michael Duncan. We'll see if that happens.
I got an extra one.
I actually think I've seen that. I think he can do it just fine. You guys will be impressive.
Not going to beat me.
Okay. Well, and in Wisconsin, you better be able to do that, right?
Yeah,
that's
exactly
an essential part of winning the vote. But, the Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania corridor, these are great opportunities. Of course, we need to win Ohio. We need to win Montana. I think West Virginia, you can kind of put a fork in that one. But
Yeah.
And then you've got Nevada out there. You got Arizona, Maryland.
Yeah.
This is a big, extensive map, and really we're blessed with this year quality candidates who, if well-resourced, I think have a good chance of getting across the finish line in all those states. Now, as NRC's chairman Steve Daines points out, we could win them all, we could lose them all. They're all razor-edge races. But I think there's a little bit of a tailwind brewing out there, and I think these candidates are all positioned to take advantage of that. And it would be nice to get a little margin because the 26 and 28 cycles aren't so good for Republicans in the Senate. So we need to. It would be great to from a governing standpoint too, to have a little bit of cushion there.
And also just to open the aperture a little bit, everyone I know is focused on the presidential campaign, but having President Trump there with as large a majority as we can have in the Senate and in the House just makes his job of fixing things that much easier.
This is the guy who's had to find the votes for all of these things, right? I mean, as the whip in the Senate conference. I mean, look, it goes without saying when you're trying to confirm cabinet nominees, you're not going to have a compliant Democratic Party. This is about trying to provide margins where we can safely build President Trump's team.
Right, and the one thing that's going to be key coming right out of that, Josh, in November, is getting that team installed quickly. Yeah. And it's a lot easier to do that, obviously, if you got a little bit of a cushion in the Senate. And it's been hard. Being in the minorities is awful, especially when Chuck Schumer's running the Senate. So we've got to fix that, and that's something that happens overnight. But if we get the majority, we're going to be in the position then of trying to confirm a lot of those cabinet secretaries, agency department heads that are so key to governing the country, and which are going to be really essential when it comes to undoing a lot of the damage done by the Biden administration. So we got to hit the ground running, and we intend to do that. But it's obviously much easier in the Senate if you have the bigger the vote, the better. And we've never had more than 55 in the Senate going back to the popular election of his Senate.
Yeah, right.
So it'd be nice to see, just feel a little, once in a while, what the Democrats have had multiple times throughout history, and it's so much easier, obviously, to get things done.
Well, before we let you go, you're obviously running for the top job. You're number 2 now. Number 1 job's going to be open next fall. You're running for it. You've obviously spent an awful lot of time in close proximity to how Senate Republicans run, how it's been most effective over the years, and how you can get stuff done. This is a job, obviously, you're seeking here this fall.
It is, and it's a big job. And of course, Senator McConnell leaves big shoes to fill. He's had a tremendous record of accomplishment during his years leading the Senate. And but this is we're kind of a new generation we're stepping into here, and we want to do everything we can to help the team succeed. That's how I approach things. Counting the votes, trying to get the votes. In the whip job, I think, is good preparation for leading the Senate and knowing what the dimensions are, what you can accomplish, what the parameters are there, and just do everything we can to keep your head down, do the work, and just really get some wins. I think we need some wins. The American people need and want some wins. And I think with a Republican majority, if we can hang on the House and get the President Trump into the White House, we'll be well positioned to do just that. So.
Oh, your lips to God's ears,
yes,
honestly.
Sir.
Senator Thune, I can't thank you enough. This is a guy who's been a conservative warrior for us for many, many years. Appreciate everything you're doing.
Thanks,
and will
Josh.
continue to do. And you're welcome back on the program anytime. Hopefully we run into you the next couple of days.
Always good to be with you, and maybe at some point somewhere other than Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Not that I love it here. I'm a Packer fan, by the way, going back to my Vince Lombardi and Bart Starr days. So
Well, let's go hunt or fish or something.
That's a good thing, yeah.
Doesn't that sound better?
Just say when. Just say when.
Okay, all right. I'm going to take you up on that.
Okay, sounds good.
Senator
Thanks, guys.
John Thune, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely terrific senator from South Dakota, the whip of the Republican Conference in the United States Senate. We have got, you have fans.
No, I do. You have one fan?
You have fans.
I have fan.
You have fans. We're going to do a hard transition here, Senator, so you can leave when you want.
Kicking them out.
Or you can just be the 5th host. We're going to be here all week. So anytime you want to come back, you can just hang out.
It does feel good here in the shade, but I'll let you.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Take care. So our next guest here on the Variety program, I want to just underscore, he's a good friend. I've known him for very many years. We worked kind of in offices alongside of each other when I was in Senate leadership, gotten to know him pretty well. He is the president and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. Mike Summers, ladies and gentlemen. Mike, there he is. Look at this handsome guy, huh? Good Lord. Huh?
Yeah, great.
My goodness. That looks like a man who represents, the energy industry, shall we say.
It's a man who went to college in Ohio.
Well, here it is again.
There it is.
I actually went to college in the congressional district of John Boehner, which is also the home of the next vice president of the United
That's
States.
exactly right. Exactly right.
What a gentleman. And listen, before we get into the substance of the interview, I will say that you were, in your organization, a very early supporter of what we're doing here on the Ruthless Friday program. We did an entire series of interviews with primary candidates last year leading into what is now the Republican National Convention. We would not have been able to do it without the help of API and the incredible work that you all are doing. More importantly to you as the listener, you wouldn't be able to do what you want to do in terms of turning on your light switch without them, because they are absolutely steadfast and you cannot get around them in Washington, D.C. with the organization that this guy's running. So thanks for everything, Mike.
Well, it's great to be here. We wouldn't miss a convention without Ruthless, so we're so proud to be part of the Ruthless family.
Yes.
I'm proud to say that I'm a fan. I listen to every episode, but I'm also excited to announce that my daughter is now a huge fan of Ruthless, an aspiring guest on the Ruthless Variety Show.
Oh, you got to bring her back. This is terrific news. I mean, we're indoctrinating people of all ages.
Even 21-year-olds at Miami, Ohio.
She's going to school in Miami.
She is.
And as you know,
family tradition.
As you know, Mike, Miami was a university before Florida was a state.
That's
so
exactly
anybody
right.
who's asking that question, which one, that answer.
1809. Exactly right. Great to be in Milwaukee, though. With that.
So you got a lot of stuff going on, and your job gets even more intense when you've got a Democratic administration hell-bent on trying to ruin American energy, period.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't matter in what form or fashion it comes in. They basically want to make us reliant on China. My words, not yours. But look, you've got a mandate in trying to not only represent your members, but trying to make sure the American people understand how significant it is from a national security perspective, from a domestic economy perspective. Like, tell us how it feels like you guys have made a lot of progress, I'll be honest with you.
We have made a lot of progress. Let's put this in perspective, though. The United States is now the #1 producer of oil and natural gas in the world.
Man.
And that is mainly because of the innovation from the oil and gas industry. It has nothing to do with a mandate or something that the federal government wanted us to do. It's because of innovation in this industry. But if we get the policies wrong, if we get the regulations gone, that could all go away. So we have to get this right. And unfortunately, what this administration has been pursuing are policies that are going to set us back. They're going to take us back to a place where we're importing oil and gas, not exporting.
Which is wild. I mean,
this is the most important geopolitical thing that we can do domestically, is provide oil and gas not just to us and to our consumers, but to consumers around the world, and particularly to our allies.
Right.
Think about what would have happened if during the Russia invasion of Ukraine, if America wasn't the #1 energy supplier to the world. We would not have been able to replace that Russian piped gas into Europe with American LNG. And what did the Biden administration do? They decided to stop export permits for new LNG terminals, which has halted construction all over the Louisiana and the Texas Gulf Coast.
Terrible.
We've got to change these policies. And unfortunately, it may take an election to get the right remedy for all of us.
Yeah, I think there's no question about that. And I remember, look, everybody on the left wants to think of the energy industry and some boogeyman, right? And like every 10 years it becomes, well, these guys are all responsible for our gas price or whatever it is that they can't directly be blamed for. They just try to shove it off on you. But there are hard times too. And we all remember what it was like during COVID, for example, when the government basically locked things down. People couldn't travel about the country. Price of everything came around. I just remember your leadership in that time in talking with then President Trump about what President Trump tried to do to invest in oil and gas and try to make sure that we took advantage not only with the industry, but on behalf of the American people. And Democrats were like, no way. So it seems like the relationship that you all have built, at least over the 4 years that he was president, is incredibly important.
Well, that's just it. We don't actually have to speculate what kind of policies this president would put into place. We know the policies he's going to put in place because he was in office for 4 years. And during that period, we dealt with one of the biggest crises that this industry has ever felt. Oil prices actually went negative for a day, negative $30 as a consequence to a flood of oil coming from Russia and Saudi Arabia. We sat in the Oval Office with the president. He agreed that he was going to negotiate to try to stop that flood of oil that was coming in the United States and dealing with this terrible pandemic that we dealt with. So we know what we're going to get. We know that he's going to pursue American energy independence, and we're excited about that. So it's unfortunate that we're dealing with this situation we're in because we are still producing more oil and gas than we ever have before, but most of it is on private lands.
Yeah, interesting.
And 20% of the oil and gas that we get right now is actually on public lands in the Gulf of Mexico and onshore. So the real question is, this President Biden right now, what he's doing is he's trying to stop oil and gas wherever he can, which is on federal lands and with the regulatory onslaught. If we could just get back to a place where we have regularity, where we have regular lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico, where we're permitting and leasing on federal lands, we would be in a much better place geopolitically, and it'd be better for American consumers.
Are you saying, Mike, that 3.5 years ago when Joe Biden was sworn in as president, all of a sudden everything started to shut down?
Everything slowed down. Think about it this way. Were it not for Joe Manchin mandating that there were lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico, there would be zero lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico during this president's term.
Wow.
And he is mandated to have lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico. And we got 2, but only because of Joe Manchin's negotiation. This year, for the first time in 40 years, we'll have 0 lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico.
Unreal.
To put this in perspective, we are still operating on leases from the Reagan administration. This is a long-term investment. And if you don't have those lease sales regularly, you're not going to have the energy that you need 30, 40, 50 years from now. So what these policies are doing is they're sowing the seeds of the next energy crisis. We have to invest now for the future.
No question about it. The other piece of this, Mike, that I find interesting, I know you guys are very involved in, is it's not just about limiting our domestic production of energy. They've been pretty clear on that for a period of years. It's also about changing everything in our economy to sort of be more reliant on China. The electric vehicle mandate, for example. It's something President Trump talks a lot about. I hear congressional Republicans talk about. We've been wailing on this thing on the Variety program because we can't figure out for the life of me how you can claim to represent this country, understanding what makes us stronger economically, stronger from a national security perspective vis-a-vis the world, and then saying, well, let's throw that out and let's go rely on them, as if we haven't seen recent evidence about what it looks like when we have to be entirely reliant on other places of the world. Right? I mean, it's wild to me.
Well, again, if you think about the fact that in 2008, we were producing about 6 million barrels of oil a day, and that number was going down. And then fracking, horizontal drilling came along, and we were able to produce more. We now produce 13 million barrels of oil every single day. That's an American success story, and that number's going up, and it will go up if we can continue to invest in that kind of development. So before 2008, we were dependent on OPEC. Why in the world would we want to go back to a situation where now we're dependent on China? China imports 10 million barrels of oil every single day. They're not energy independent. We should be proud of this. We should be proud of our American independence. We should be pursuing more energy independence. And unfortunately, a lot of these policies are going to take us in the exact opposite direction.
Don't you kind of get the impression every once in a while that you got like a Chinese ambassador sitting around being like, are they going to do this for us? I mean, this has been a real disadvantage for us, but look at these guys. They're going to do this for us, aren't they?
Well, you think about we have these rare earth minerals in the United States.
Yeah.
It's only rare that you mine for them. They're not rare, but they're not allowing us to mine for these rare earth minerals either.
Double whammy.
I mean, just today, the administration announced that they're trying to cut back on the amount of acreage in Alaska, in an area called the National Petroleum Reserve. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Can't make it up.
So everywhere they can restrict, they are. And it is only because of production on private lands that we're able to continue to produce more in the United States. And we need to do more of it.
And you know what's so wild? Most of the people who drove into work this morning put gas in their car. And they're going to rely on that same tank of gas to get them home at night. And then they're going to do it again tomorrow. And they're going to do it again the next day. And so what the Biden administration is doing, what Democrats are doing, is completely setting normal people back. I mean, everybody just wants to go to work. You know, they're not trying to change the world. They're just trying to change their paycheck.
Yep.
And they can't do it if Biden is like tamping down on them like this.
Well, it's something that a friend of mine calls regressive progressivism. These are regressive taxes on the people who can't afford it. And now they want to force you into an electric vehicle. That might make sense for someone who lives in Washington, D.C. and commutes 20 miles a day.
Right.
I mean, honestly, it might make sense for some of us on this stage because we don't commute that far.
I will never own an electric
Me
vehicle.
neither. Don't worry. There's no threat of me ever running. But it does not make sense for somebody who lives in Wisconsin, who
Right.
works on a dairy farm, who has to get in a pickup every single day.
Right.
And they're trying to force feed these kinds of vehicles down the throats of people who don't want them. And certainly, it doesn't make sense for their lifestyle.
Right. Right.
Well, listen, this is one of the most effective advocates, and I'm not just blowing sunshine here, pal. I really mean it, and I talked to an awful lot of your colleagues who think the exact same. This is one of the most effective advocates for any product. But what you're doing and what your organization is doing on behalf of Americans throughout this country is incredibly admirable. It literally means dollars in the pockets of people throughout this country. They may never know who you are, but I can promise you they're thankful for Mike Summers. So thanks so much for all the work that you've done.
Thanks, guys. And thanks for everything you're doing. So it's great to be in Milwaukee with you.
Thanks for being a part of it, pal.
Thank you.
So that's Mike Summers, President and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. He is a whale of a guy, and honestly, I really mean it. You put this guy in the Oval Office with some folks, he's going to get the job done. I've seen it both from a policymaking career when he was in a speaker's office in his first role, or now heading up a big trade association. The guy is first class, isn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, again, it seems like such a no-brainer, but the fact that we have someone fighting essentially a no-brainer administration, it's great to know we got that.
Yeah, no, absolutely incredible. And I got to say, look, one of the things that we endeavor to do here in the Ruthless Variety program, we like to bring you the names that you all see on the cable news and all these other things. But we also like to give you a little look under the hood on the things that actually matter and the people who matter and the good work that's going on underneath that. This is a perfect example of that. It's just an incredible amount of work that goes into it.
It's a great example of that. And I think one of the things that's so great about our show is that we give you some fun, we give you some details in sort of a fun way. You know what I mean? Like, you're not getting that on any other show. That's why you need to like and subscribe to the Ruthless Variety program so you can continue getting this on a routine basis.
Yeah, give us some comments. Let's talk some smack.
Yeah, I think that McDaniel said that he's watching the chat that we have going for the live stream. I'd want to hear what folks think about the VP pick of J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
I mean, that is like, we got breaking news on here with that pick. I want to hear what everyone has to say. And McDaniel says he's going to stay right on top of that.
I'm kind of curious about what people think about Michael's tie.
Yeah. I mean, he's looking dapper today.
I think he has got a very summary look going on, and I appreciate it. One, appreciate it.
Who is that on your tie?
Well, I got this tie at Monticello. This is a Vineyard Vines
Oh, is that Thomas Jefferson?
tie. Yeah, and I just figured because we're lakeside, it's
Yeah.
a summer look. It's bright. It's Vineyard Vines, and that's sort of what I've got. The blue blazer.
Ah.
You know.
Yeah. No, it's great. You should be on the front of a yacht somewhere.
That's right. Yeah.
We should be.
Maybe we can do that here. After this. Just commandeer one out there on Lake Michigan.
Maybe we should be.
I gotta salute you guys for wearing ties. For crying out loud, I'm wearing a golf shirt under this jacket. I can barely stand it as it is.
I'm insanely jealous. I saw the temperature being like 15 degrees lower than the last time we did this. I was like, no problem. And now I'm like,
Yeah, see, that's the danger. Is like, I looked at the forecast and I was like, 95 degrees is still 95 degrees.
I mean,
not
it's
105 like last time, but it's
No, we got the breeze. We got the breeze off the lake. We're fine.
So tell me, look, we haven't been here all that long. We flew in this morning, but we talked at the top of the program. Like, what's the attitude? What's the mojo like? Seems to me like a lot of smiling faces. People are pretty into this thing, and it's the events of the last 48 hours do not seem to have diminished the enthusiasm, which you have to think about as an option in this situation.
Yeah, well, I think there's a reason for that, and the reason for that is there's so much talk. You always talk about how do people respond to adverse scenarios, and the way that President Trump responded to the most adverse of scenarios in our lifetimes is a validation for everybody walking around here that they picked the right guy, that this is the guy for the moment. And what they saw, I mean, we talked about this at the beginning of the show, but what we saw on Saturday was leadership. That man, regardless of he didn't know if there was a second shooter out there. Mm-hmm. He stood up and held up his fist and chanted, "Fight, fight," anyway, because he knew that people needed to hear that from a leader. They don't hear it from our current president. And it's the kind of contrast that everybody has been looking for. It's exactly what people want at the exact right moment. And I'm telling you, everybody here is feeling the enthusiasm that anybody would feel with a leader like Donald Trump.
And to your point on validation, I think this is important, is that the Republican Party did it right. We had a real primary.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? We were here at the first Republican debate at Fiserv Forum here.
Yep.
Right? And we had a contest of ideas. And so now the Republican Party is as united as it's ever been.
Yeah.
Because everybody had that opportunity in that primary to say their piece.
They all had
the
their shot.
Democratic Party never had that.
No.
Right? And you got Joe Biden out there being like, I won millions of votes in this primary. Fake primary. Okay? Come on, you weren't on the ballot in New Hampshire. You tried to cancel the Iowa caucuses. Not a real primary. But that's an important part of the process when you're a party that's trying to seek the White House, is where everybody feels heard and represented. So you get to a place like this in July, everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, and they are represented. I mean, that's the other piece of it,
Yeah.
right? Is that, like, Democrats have stumbled, and that's a double entendre.
Yeah, Biden himself.
Into this election cycle with the idea that, you just renominate the President of the United States, that's fine. Never mind the fact that his glaring and obvious vulnerabilities were out for the world to see, and would likely become an issue and more of an issue as you went along. And yet, rather than trying to remedy that with a real life, like big boy, as he says, conversation at the front end, or at least have a game plan, I think it was very clear at this point. A lot of people speculated, well, what do they do if something happens to Joe Biden? Well, what's the plan B if things go south in a debate? They didn't do a damn thing.
None of it.
They didn't have the first clue what they were going to do. It was basically like, let's elevate Donald Trump because we think he's vulnerable. Then let's convict him in a court of law, and then let's market his convictions.
Yep.
Somehow we'll get between now and November and never have to talk about an awful record or the fact that our candidate can't stand up straight and complete a sentence. That's an amazingly arrogant take.
I'll tell you, it's arrogant, and it's entirely the wrong way to go about a campaign. One thing we've all worked campaigns for decades. One thing that we've all learned is that you do not run the same race twice, and that is exactly what Democrats set out to do for 2024. They were trying to run the same race that they ran in 2020. You can't do it.
Yeah.
If you try, you're going to lose. There are so many examples in so many Senate races, House races, and even presidential races through history where people try to replicate the same tactics, the same message, and everything that they did the previous cycle, and they lose because of it.
And
Democrats are in that situation now.
I think that's the thing, is there was no plan B for them because they cannot run on the record Joe Biden has. They can't run on Bidenomics because Americans feel terrible about the economy. They can't run on his open border because Americans are pissed about that too. So what they had to do is, let's do the lawfare. Let's say that Donald Trump is a threat to the country. Every single thing they've done has hurt this country more and hurt their own chances to win in the fall. They're victims of what they have created themselves.
Yeah, I mean, they are. They are in every single possible way, including the fact that they're all fighting about in the media and doing this in public because they had no plan. I mean, that's the thing that as Republicans, you always think like, boy, oh boy, I wish that we had an organization where everybody just sort of showed up and followed the leader and we all just got in line and did our thing. And whatever it is, it seems structured. They always have an answer to something. They have no answer. These people are as dumb as you thought they were.
And it was
they are even worse.
And it was great seeing, like on Twitter, you had Joe Biden tweet out, as Americans, we settle our differences at the ballot box. And then the replies are Democrats being like, actually, you didn't let us settle our differences at the ballot box.
Right.
You took, opposing candidates off the ballot in multiple states. You didn't let anyone have a voice to run against you. And now they see what they get for that.
I mean, if you really take a step back and you think about the election of 2020, it took a global pandemic for Joe Biden to sit in his basement and win this election against Donald Trump by 44,000 votes over 3 states.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like, they didn't have a good plan back then. Why would you think they had a good one now?
It is so true. We always forget this. We had a 100-year pandemic.
Yeah.
An act of God, a completely black swan event that they just sort of bootstrapped to.
Right.
They're like, we're not
like that was
guy.
a strategy. They didn't have a strategy then. They
It
don't
just-
have one now.
It just so happened that a byproduct of exactly that moment in time was you couldn't go out in public anyway, so they didn't have to show this guy's face anywhere.
Right.
The only thing they could do for political rallies is a bunch of cars honking their fucking horns.
Right.
You think at some point in 2023 they're like, all right, Anthony, we're gonna need another variant. Come on, cook something up.
Don't you have something? Don't you talk to your Chinese
Go
buddies?
back to Wuhan.
But it's a recipe for the other contrast we're seeing in this election. It's not just a contrast in leadership, it's a contrast in enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And all of the stories about these meetings with Democrat lawmakers and Joe Biden and
It's
talking about the
amazing.
presidential, they're walking out of the meetings crying. They're so depressed. They describe it as a funeral because they know what they have and they are scared.
Well, this
to
is
death.
my favorite part. So, like Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the Democrats in the House, or Chuck Schumer, the majority leader of the Senate, they go to meet with Joe Biden, and they come out and they're like, how was it? And he's like, it was a good meeting. It's productive. Look, we've had a lot of experience here. Let me just tell you that if there's any chance that you walk in with a presumptive nominee of your party 120 days before an election, and your answer is not, I fully support our candidate, end, full stop, no ad lib, no, you got a problem.
That's a problem.
You got a problem. And they have got huge problems. And it's just going to get exacerbated by what I imagine is going to be a hell of a show behind us over the next 4 days. Some incredible speeches now with Donald J. Trump and J.D. Vance on a ticket, Trump-Vance for the first time. So excited to hear from all of that. We've got some great guests. We have Governor Youngkin in front of us, and we're going to do a little bit of insight of the best surrogate speeches of all time at the RNC. And that means people who are not the president nominee, not the VP. What are the best speeches that sort of elevated over time and were memorable? We've got our faves here on the Ruthless Variety program. We'll get to all of that right after this.
The last few years have been really tough on my family. This never-ending cycle of inflation is taking more and more out of my paycheck. Hardworking families like mine are hurting. We need help and relief from rising costs. Why aren't we harnessing more of America's natural resources to help reduce inflation? We can't afford to wait any longer. We need more energy and more choices now. Learn more at lightsonenergy.com.
52 million Americans own crypto. These are entrepreneurs, innovators, and job creators who are deeply invested in building a strong America that dominates this emerging technology sector. This year, the official Republican Party platform even pledges support for American crypto owners. Stand with Crypto is mobilizing the crypto community to have an impact on issues and elections. With all the close races across the country, crypto voters could be the difference between winning and losing in November. Find out more and see where your candidates stand in your area at standwithcrypto.org.
Hey folks, my friends at Americans for Prosperity are again on the front lines fighting against the border crisis. It's clear the politicians aren't going to solve this on their own. It's going to take good old-fashioned grassroots activism, and that's what AFP specializes in. Americans for Prosperity Foundation has taken hundreds of concerned citizens to see the border for themselves, turning them into informed activists. And Americans for Prosperity knows just what we need: more border agents, more walls, and more technology. That's what makes Americans for Prosperity unique. They do the tough work of organizing and mobilizing everyday Americans to make a difference. In fact, they just announced a major campaign to hold Biden and his allies accountable for the crisis at the border. Learn more at secureborder.secureamerica.com. That's secureborder.secureamerica.com.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But DC politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
So we're back here live at the Republican National Convention 2024 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Fellas, great group of interviews. We want to get down to business here. Our thought is almost every convention that you've ever seen, Republican or Democrat, has a myriad of voices. Up-and-coming stars, established stars. They try to meld together a narrative that supports the ticket, sort of supports the narrative that you want to go into the final days of a campaign. And every once in a while, something stands out. And what we'd like to do is kind of give you our favorites and recollection of not only how it's stood out in that convention and how it maybe shaped that race, but going forward a little bit too, because I think there was some of the things that we've talked about have had a tendency of being a bigger part of conservative culture long after the final gavel went down on Republican National Convention. So Duncan, I think that the first one is in your court.
Yes.
And which is the one that comes to memory for you?
Mine is 2004, Zell Miller.
Oh, that's a good one.
And the reason why I picked this one is I think the best conventions you see in the presidential race involve sort of a heterodox perspective. You expect to see senators, you expect to see Speaker of the House, congressmen, things like that of the party, right? But sometimes the best vignettes of a convention are finding somebody from the opposite party who says, I'm on board.
Yeah.
And nobody did that better than Zell Miller. Let's go to that clip.
Along with all the other members of our close-knit family, they are my and Shirley's most precious possessions. And I know that's how you feel about your family also. Like you, I think of their future, the promises and the perils they will face. Like you, I believe that the next 4 years will determine what kind of world they will grow up in. And like you, I ask, which leader is it today that has the vision, the willpower, and yes, the backbone to best protect my family? The clear answer to that question has placed me in this hall with you tonight, for my family is more important than my party. There is but one man to whom I am willing to entrust their future, and that man's name is George W. Bush.
Oh, man.
Yeah, barn burner.
What a memorable speech.
Right, and look, I think this is going to be a security election in so many ways. Security of the southern border, security of our cities. I mean, I think the American people, and just look at the backdrop of this weekend's events, like the people are thirsting for strong leadership, like Zell Miller said, leadership with a backbone.
Yeah, what's so incredible about that, for those of you who weren't around to see it, I mean, that was the 04 convention. John Kerry reporting for duty. With Edwards. I mean, good God.
Yeah. Just a disaster.
Edwards was on that ticket.
But who gave the keynote for the Democrats that year? Barack Obama.
Yeah.
So it is the launching pad for a lot of careers.
It totally is. But I think that the significance, we didn't play this component of the speech. I think that
There's so many
amazing.
highlights. I had to pick one.
But it was a national security referendum. It was about whether or not, in the wake of 9/11, George Bush was protecting you, or whether you could do it a better way, right? And Zell Miller, in some ways, embodied the turn that the country was having away from a Southern Democrat into a Southern Republican, and seeing the prism of how you vote for presidents in a very different way. I remember Georgia is where he was from. All throughout that Southeast, up until the years just preceding that speech, it was all Democrat.
And it's just mind-blowing, because it's impossible to imagine today a Democrat like that saying, I place my family before my party.
Yeah.
Right.
It's incredible.
It really is incredible. That was an absolutely memorable. I'm glad you picked that one. Ashbrook, you've got one of your own that you're thinking about.
Fellas, the speech that I've got was delivered in Houston, Texas in 1992 by Pat Buchanan. You guys remember that Buchanan ran a primary against incumbent President George H.W. Bush. And what you may not remember is that Buchanan is actually the reason everybody knows read my lips, no new taxes as a negative thing. He ran a fierce campaign against the incumbent president. And when he showed up at the convention, he delivered a speech about culture. It was largely very similar to his stump speech from the campaign trail. And the Bush people didn't love every single word, but they did love the fact that this man, who drew 3 million votes throughout the course of the primary, endorsed George H.W. Bush and told everybody in the Buchanan brigades to support George H.W. Bush. Let's go to that clip.
The presidency is also an office that Theodore Roosevelt called America's bully pulpit. Harry Truman said it was preeminently a place of moral leadership. George Bush is a defender of right to life and a champion of the Judeo-Christian values and beliefs upon which America was founded.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think your point, which is a really good one, is that he represented a very different part of the party.
Right.
No less significant in terms of forming the coalition that it takes to win a national election.
That's exactly right. And at this convention, we'll hear speeches from Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley, both in support of their former opponent, President Donald Trump. And I think that former primary opponents giving an endorsement of a president, remember when Ted Cruz did it, it was a little bit of caught some people's attention, but remember, it's happened throughout history. It has impact. Nikki Haley at this convention delivering a speech in support of President Trump will have an impact. And I think in the same way that what Pat Buchanan delivered.
Because I think that's lost. Look, I think that's lost on a lot of people about the way you formulate convention addresses, right? I mean, it's thought of typically as you have the most fervent supporters, you try to bring everybody in, say nice things. It's kind of like primetime nets are forced to take it. It's like an infomercial over several days, at least in primetime. But if you're thinking critically about the way you want to put it together, it's exactly that, right? It is trying to find the voices that may not have been on the same page. But you're now 100 days away from an election. If you're not on the same page and the other people are, we got a hell of a problem here. Mm-hmm. So if we agree on 90% of what it is that we're talking about, elevate those voices, make sure that they're heard and seen, and more importantly, that their supporters hear and see them and know that they have a place in the party that you intend to run. Correct?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And that's what I think we're going to hear at this convention this week.
And can you imagine a time in which that's, more important than now?
Yeah.
I mean, we had that real primary. Nikki Haley, for example, Ron DeSantis, as Ashbrook mentioned, these are people with fervent bases of their own. And to have those people come here before the delegates at Fiserv Forum over the next 4 days and say, I support Donald Trump, is going to be huge for people who maybe had an inkling to maybe stay home or to not, pull the lever for Donald Trump. I mean, that's how you get from doing well to building the sort of majorities that John Thune and Cornyn talked about here earlier that take us to a place where we've got unified Republican control after November.
And fellas, it projects unity.
Yep.
It's something that everybody in the country wants so badly. It's something Democrats do not have at all.
And can't have no hope of trying to. You can imagine the Democratic National Committee. Can you imagine what they're doing from a scheduling standpoint? Like, who do we get? Chuck Schumer?
I mean, I guess more barricades for the front doors in Chicago. That's all they noticed.
That guy from Gaza available?
Yeah.
Hamas terrorist? I think he's still in Qatar.
Well, Hamas funders are probably hosting all the parties that are around the joint. You don't want to be too hard on them on the floor of the convention in Chicago. Listen, for me, it is all one thing. Like, there's one for me, and then there's everything else. As a conservative, as a Republican, it is Ronald Reagan's time for choosing.
Oh, great speech.
Yeah. It is the speech that he gave at the 1964 nomination, Barry Goldwater, when the whole country was sort of in a state of tumult. And this was an actor, literally someone people didn't take all that seriously. They knew that he was politically gifted. They knew that he had something, but he wasn't on a national stage at all until this moment. Let's play clip 3.
And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. But beyond that, the full power of centralized government, this was the very thing the Founding Fathers sought to minimize. They knew that governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they know when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose.
So first, I highly recommend, if you have not heard that entire speech, please do. Please do today. It is, I mean, you'll get goosebumps. It is one of the greatest speeches I think I've ever seen delivered.
No question about it. I think, and look, we look at these things not only, as we said, for the impact that they have on this convention and this election. You also mentioned Barack Obama, his 2004 speech, and ultimately what that meant by Democrats nominating him and being a two-term president of their party, based solely on the coming out party that was the 2004 nomination speech. This is one that not just had an impact at the moment. It had 40 years of impact, 50 years of impact, 60 years of impact. This is something that we are dealing with. He set the ground rules by which it means to be conservative.
Yeah.
He set the plan in place that what it is that we're fighting against. Remember, we're dealing with Rockefeller Republicans. You're dealing with, like, you know, you can kind of govern in the middle of things. Let's just kind of pretend like nothing's different.
And we're in the middle of a Cold War with the Soviet Union. You know?
Right.
I mean, the stakes of this are very high.
Stakes of this are really high. You've got the beginning of Vietnam. You've got all kinds of things that are percolating, and not to mention the assassination of a former president. But amidst that, here's a guy who fearlessly takes to the stage, and people don't really know him from Adam, other than the fact that they are a huge fan of B movies, you know, and they look at him and they say, holy smokes, that guy just gave me purpose. That just gave me the exact, what I'm feeling, he put words to. And he put words to it for 4 generations of conservatives in that very speech. That's why it's my absolute favorite.
I mean, that's a tough act to follow.
Yeah.
That's a tough act to follow. I mean, thanks for that.
Yeah.
I'm going to highlight the speech that Sarah Palin gave.
Oh, yeah.
Republican National Convention. They literally, I mean, they wrote a book called Game Change as a result of this. We should go straight to the clip.
I had the privilege of living most of my life in a small town. I was just your average hockey mom and signed up for the PTA. I love those hockey moms. You know, they say the difference between a hockey mom and a pit bull? Lipstick.
I mean, so I was on the floor during that. And granted, 2008 wasn't our best stuff, right? I mean, we were inundated with bad news out of Iraq. We just had a financial crisis. Republicans were beat before they started in a lot of ways, not to mention the fact that we were against Barack Obama, which people didn't know Barack Obama. They thought he was some kind of a transformative figure that would govern somewhere in the center left and be sort of a thoughtful new next generation type leader. Now, we found out bullshit, right? I mean, that was not exactly the case. But I remember that moment and being on the floor for a couple of reasons. One is the energy wasn't great, and she came in and hammered that line in particular that you highlighted, and it flipped. And all of a sudden you could feel this energy sort of building. And it may have propelled what ultimately became a Tea Party and ultimately became sort of an anti-establishment, you know, let's shake things up in Washington type movement.
And that famous line, the like difference between a hockey mom and a pit bull, that was ad-libbed. That wasn't a written part of the speech. And I think connecting to everyday Americans is something critical. It's something that Donald Trump accomplished when he was running for president, something that he continues to do far better than the Democrats, and something that I hope we're going to see a lot of at this convention.
Yeah, I listen, what you're seeing with this, there's a lot of stars, right? There's a lot of younger generation stuff. I mean, you know, you may have seen the schedule in prime time. A lot of names you recognize, a lot of people, as you said, the Ron DeSantis is the Nikki Haley's, not to mention, obviously, J.D. Vance has got Wednesday night now. We didn't know that before. But there's a lot of young generational talent there that is ripe for a breakout moment.
And again, that is a terrific contrast that we have with the Democrats, where the number one Achilles heel for Joe Biden is Joe Biden because he is 500 years old.
Right.
That party is 500 years old. They've got Chuck Schumer. They've got Nancy Pelosi. They have no other plan whatsoever. And their ideas aren't exciting because you look at their base voters are outraged right now that they are stuck with a candidate they can't relate to, that they don't trust, that they don't believe in.
Yeah.
And the exact opposite on the spectrum, you're here. You see, you've got young people. You've got exciting new candidates.
Yeah.
You've got J.D. Vance on the ticket.
Right. And you have up and coming Republican stars who have been fist fighting each other behind the scenes for a shot at the podium. I mean, we don't need to go into all the details, but everybody, absolutely everybody in this party wanted to be on that podium this week. Not everybody got a shot. The opposite is happening for Democrats.
Yeah.
They're like, wait a minute, 3 minutes? Can I actually do 2?
Yeah.
Can I do it in daytime? Because I don't want to be seen in prime time flacking for Joe Biden. They do not want to be on their stage.
That's a great point.
Everybody wants to be on ours.
I think we need Sherrod Brown, and we need Tester, and we need all these guys in prime time shaking Joe Biden's
Jackie
hand.
Rosen. Let's get up there, every vulnerable Democrat. Take your time, 10, 15 minutes. Say whatever you'd like to say.
Yeah, can we get every swing state Democrat to talk about Bidenomics?
Yeah,
I mean, that'll be
how
a
great it
tremendous
is.
help.
I saw the cognitive test. He drew the clock. It was great.
Wait, there's an awful lot of voices that people haven't heard at a national level, right? I think about like a former Attorney General, now Senator Eric Schmidt.
Right.
There is somebody that the first time you hear Eric Schmidt, you're going to be very impressed by Eric Schmidt. First of all, he's a big guy.
Right.
He's an ominous presence. I mean, he's a but he speaks so well to the anxieties that we deal with and that we're dealing with in the backdrop of this convention, whether it's lawfare, whether it's safety, whether it's crime, whether it's, a whole range of things. Like, that's somebody that you look at. I mean, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, this guy could capture some imagination of things that we're talking about 10 years from now. And I think that's the importance of this segment and what we're talking about. You're going to find somebody over the next 4 days. You're like, oh, who the hell was that?
Yeah, there's going to be some breakout stars because our bench is so deep right now.
Right.
I mean, we've got such a great lineup, and we have enthusiasm on our side.
And if you think, not to get too far into the details here, sorry to interrupt, Duncan,
Go ahead.
but if you think about how you put together a speech, if you're writing a speech for somebody who's delivering it at the convention, at this convention, their speech is about this election. It's about right now. It's about fixing our problems right now in front of us. If you're writing a speech for a Democrat, you're like, boss, we want to point to the future. We want to point to something a little bit past this election, because just in case it doesn't work out, we want to show that you have longevity.
Yeah. Oh, that's brutal.
No question
that's
about
brutal.
Yeah, I think if you're watching this and you're thinking, wow, this is fantastic, we have so much momentum and this is great, it's going to get so much better here over the next 3 days. I mean, to all your points, there's so many great people are going to be coming to be speaking on stage tonight and in the subsequent days. But just to put like sort of a button on this whole segment, I mean, you got the Democrats on these conference calls crying and leaking to reporters and saying they want to replace Joe Biden, some of them on the record, some off the record. They're in complete disarray. We've never been more united, and I think that is basically the theme of what we brought you here today.
No question.
100%.
You know who's somebody who I've thought a lot about being very excited to see speak?
Yeah.
Who I, honestly didn't know if he was going to make the set today for fear that he would have the Wednesday night slot himself. Governor Glenn Youngkin.
Yes.
How are you, sir?
So great to see you.
Oh my gosh, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming
fun
in.
to be with you guys.
Oh, it's just a pleasure. Thanks for taking your time.
Great to see you, Governor.
Great to see you. Amazing. Nice to see all you guys.
For those of you who've not seen us live and in person with Governor Youngkin, we've run into him at various events over the years, and he's always the friendliest guy in the crowd and has taken time out of his day to keep us updated on what's happening in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where 3 of us at least live.
Well, who's the leftover?
I'm in North Carolina.
What are you doing?
I mean, we still have a lot of, it's a good thing going on. Hopefully we get a Republican governor in North Carolina.
No, I think
I'm
you will.
sure you'll help make that happen,
I think
too.
you will. We just beat North Carolina as top state to do business.
He's immediately on the talkers.
You got to move up. You got to move up.
You get us a Republican governor, we'll
that's
be
what I'm
up there,
saying.
too.
It's interesting. I called Mark this week and I said, hey, you got work to do because it's iron on iron when you have great states that you compete against. And I'm always talking to Governor Lee and Governor Kemp and Governor McMaster and Governor DeSantis and Governor Abbott. And I'm saying, hey, come on, we're going to compete. And it's fabulous because we make each other better. Now, we just happen to be number one right now. And that's okay with me. That's okay with me.
I'm beginning to think that we should not have shelved the idea that you come up and dunk on Duncan. We're thinking about putting a basketball hoop on here and just having him stand underneath it, where your whole entrance was just dunking on him.
Duncan.
Yeah, I would have done that. Yeah. I would have done that. But because at the end of the day, we play to win. That's how we play.
Yeah. That's right.
We play all out. And as a state, that's what we do, and we're gonna do everything we have to do in order to win. And I think that's lost on so many people, and particularly the Biden administration. They've forgotten that every single day America has to compete.
Yes.
And we have to be strong around the world. We have to be strong at home. We have to project that strength. And it not only is very important for America to project strength, but allows our businesses to be strong around the world too. And that's what this is all about, competing.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a new energy in Virginia. No question about it. You are responsible for it. It was an election, an off-year election where, frankly, Republicans were despondent. We had not had a good 2020. We were sort of rolling in with a malaise. You reinvigorated something and then united the center left and center right in a way to carry a state that, like, Joe Biden won by 13?
He won by 10.
10?
He won by 10.
And you're all of a sudden, you're dominating a guy who is a household name in Virginia politics and becoming governor and then doing something about it, which is just, it's been totally admirable from my perspective.
Well, I will tell you, when we started this grand adventure and I told my wife that I was going to quit my job and run for governor, once she put down the phone from calling 911 and stopped crying, and we prayed over it and we said, listen, if we're elected, we'll serve. It's been nonstop and it's been spectacular because, at the time, Virginia was despondent. I mean, the very first state called for Joe Biden in 2020 was Virginia. I was literally at an election night party and we were all watching, and at 7:01, at 7:01, they called it for Virginia, and I said, I'm running.
Yeah.
Because this is not the Virginia that we know. Virginia that we know is low taxes and parents matter, and it's back in the blue, and it's patriotic. I mean, we have 850,000 of the greatest Americans between our active duty and our veteran military heroes. And Virginia doesn't get called at 7:01 for Joe Biden.
Right.
And so we went to work, and I have to tell you, we didn't let a single vote go unchecked. What those consultants tell you is that, you have to campaign here, you can't win there, spend your time here. And we said, no, we're going everywhere.
Yeah.
We campaigned in every neighborhood, in every corner of the state, and we gave everybody a chance to hear that Virginia can win.
He's
really
really not joking. I mean, I live in a very liberal part of Northern Virginia, and I think Youngkin volunteers knocked on my door 8 times over the course of the last 3 weeks of the election.
Yeah,
it's incredible what you did with your ground game.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I hope national Republicans are listening to what you're talking about, because I think that people across the country are despondent right now. I think people across the country are in a similar situation to what people in Virginia were in before you were elected. And I think that what Donald Trump is trying to do this cycle is project a message like you projected when you won in Virginia. So can you just give us a little bit about your message to the state of Virginia and what you've seen since you've become governor?
Well, let me start with my message. Then I'm going to tell you what President Trump is so successfully doing in Virginia and the rest of the country. So our message was really clear that, in fact, we can win first. We needed to convince everyone that we could win.
And again, the way that teams come together is not saying we're going to lose, but we're going to try hard. That doesn't work. What you tell them is,
participation
hey,
trophies.
here's how we're going to win. And we're going to campaign everywhere, and we're going to lose Northern Virginia less bad, and then we're going to blow it out in the rest of the state. We're going to win the Latino vote. We're going to win the Asian vote. We're going to win the Indian vote. We're going to get more of the black vote than any Republicans gotten in memory. And oh, by the way, we're going to get the highest percentage of our red county vote. And we laid it out for them. This is how we're going to do it. The messaging was so important that we, in fact, are going to unleash opportunity in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're going to reduce taxes. We're going to back the blue and make our neighborhoods safe again, and make sure they know that we respect them. We're not demeaning them.
Yeah.
We're going to stand up for parents and their kids' life and restore excellence in education, and stop allowing them to teach our children what to think and teach them how to think.
Yeah.
And then finally, we're going to make government work better. You know, it was crazy when we came in. You go stand in the line at the DMV, or Division of Motor Vehicles, and you'd be there for 40 minutes before anybody even noticed you were there. And today it's 10 minutes and you're done. You're out.
That's real change.
And you can do this stuff. And so that's real spirit of Virginia was unlocked and unleashed, and people came together around it. And I think what I've been most encouraged by is that we went to work on day one, and guess what? You can do all this stuff. You know, they told me as an outside business guy, oh, you're going to be frustrated. You can't make change in government. You're never going to get all that stuff done. Well, let me tell you, we're doing it.
Yeah.
And I battle against a Democrat-controlled legislature all the time. But let me tell you, we have provided $5 billion of tax relief. We have fundamentally changed the way that parents play a role in their kids' lives. We passed bills that allowed parents to make decisions to take masks off their children in schools and to have visibility into curriculum. And if it is sexually explicit, they can get replacement curriculum. That we went to work to make sure that law enforcement had the biggest raises they have ever had. We funded over $400 million. And guess what? Government works a heck of a lot better. If you need an air or water permit in Virginia today, it takes you 1/3 of the time than it did when we came in. And so when CNBC says, hey, you're America's top state for business.
You love it.
I say, yeah, we are. We are. We're working really hard. 240,000 more Virginians working today, the most Virginians ever working in the history of the state. It works. And see, this is what President Trump is bringing to Virginia and America, is the same sense of optimism that we can do this. I mean, he's done it before. Let's just remember, there was a rip-roaring economy that he built with the lowest unemployment across women and black Americans and Hispanic Americans we've ever seen. Businesses were expanding and growing. I mean, have you guys noticed that every day that Donald Trump is projected to win, the stock market goes up?
Yeah.
Have you noticed this? I mean, come on, it's a Trump bump every time that anybody recognizes this guy is going to be our next president. He's going to restore our confidence and strength as a nation. And guess what? Virginia and America are going to win.
Well, you know what I love about this, and this is the same with President Trump, is that you challenge the conventional wisdom on what is politically possible, right? I mean, you look at the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, and you look at different constituencies. You were mentioning, we're going to do better with the black vote. We're going to do... nobody had done it in a very long time. But then you look at like your predecessor, Governor Northam, in blackface, for crying out loud, and you're like, well, why? Why wouldn't somebody come in and talk to people about how I can make their neighborhoods safer, better, schools better? I mean, education is another piece of it. That's a territory that Republicans don't venture into. You said, the hell with that. This is a real problem for my friends and neighbors and everybody's neighbors. And we're going to talk about education and how to make that better. I don't care if it's a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. I'm outside of the box on this stuff. That's why you won. And I think the message that you're purveying now over the course of your tenure is one that seems like is happening here in this building.
Uniting people around shared values.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's simple as the school, the classroom. Right.
It's not buckets.
It's not,
of
you're
people.
not a black American. You're not an Asian American. You care about your kids and their future. That unites all of us. And so you give them an agenda on those issues.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You do. And what I hear all the time, and I still go everywhere in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I get tired of sitting in Richmond, and so we go out and we take government out of Richmond and we go to Virginians and we listen to them. And what we hear over and over and over again are the concerns that they have. We're meeting. I'm worried about my financial future and my job. We're building jobs, 240,000 more people working, high-paying jobs, $74 billion of capital investment from companies in Virginia or coming to Virginia, record by factors of 2.5. I'm worried about school. Hey, first of all, let's make sure we raise expectations of excellence. Let's provide you multiple pathways and choice through school. And by the way, everybody's worried about cell phones in school. Well, last week, I told schools we're going to ban cell phones in school and create cell phone-free school zones.
We were talking about that yesterday.
We just need to do this. And I think the Republican platform that's been adopted here is a platform based on common sense. And Virginians and Americans read it and they say, well, yeah, I actually do believe that we should keep more of our hard-earned money than paid in taxes. Oh, I absolutely do believe that parents should be in charge of their children's lives. Oh, I absolutely believe that we should back the blue and celebrate law enforcement. We're a nation of laws and we have to enforce them. Oh, we should have a secure border and not have drugs and terrorists and criminals coming over the border every day in waves that we can't even control that turn every single state into a border state. Common sense. Let's secure the border. Let's empower parents. Let's back the blue. Let's reduce taxes and let's unleash prosperity. That's what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are all about right now. Yeah. And that's why I see America coming together the same way that Virginia did just 2.5 years ago.
Listen, I'm going to ask all of our viewers on this. Is there anyone that you think is going to bring more energy to advocate on your behalf than what you just heard out of Governor Glenn Youngkin? Incredible job. You've been an amazing job, not only for Virginia, but the entire conservative movement. We look forward to keeping up with you, watching and seeing what you're going to do here inside, which I imagine we'll stay tuned for.
That's great. And I would just offer everybody, if you don't live in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you're missing out. Come to Virginia. And I have to say that when President Trump wins and we have this big transition and people are coming from all over the nation to serve our country, live in Virginia. Yeah. That's where I want you to live. Come live in Virginia. Our schools are awesome. Our roads are great. We're safe communities. Our taxes are lower. And we're going to work for you as opposed to telling you work for us.
I can vouch for that. Governor Glenn Youngkin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for all you do. Yeah, God bless you. Governor. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
What an incredible guy. I mean, just so
That's
happy.
high energy.
So happy he's our governor. Good Lord. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. This is one of the people I'm talking about. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're dealing with a convention that not everybody is exposed to somebody like Governor Youngkin,
right?
You just saw him. What's not to like there?
What's not to like?
Nothing.
Our lineup is just something else.
It's just stacked. So I want to go to, if we still have it, we might have J.D. Vance on his way in, shaking some hands. There he is. He's on his way into the convention. This is his arrival at the Republican National Convention here in Milwaukee. You'll recall this morning he was picked up at his house, and there was a lot of speculation because it was security around him. And typically speaking, the United States Senator, despite the fact that they're pretty high profile, does not have a whole bunch of black Suburbans pick you up to go to work in the morning.
Where was his house located, Josh?
Ohio.
Cincinnati, Ohio.
We're talking Ohio again.
This is something that we just have to deal with on the variety program. And for those,
I just want to apologize to everybody listening and viewing.
I apologize for what? Cincinnati, Ohio is one of the greatest places on the planet.
Nothing on
And that's why President Trump chose his running mate directly from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Ugh.
You know, I used to love Ohio.
Yeah, I know. He ruined it. Me too.
I never had a problem with the Cincinnati Bengals. Never really gave much thought to the Cincinnati. Kind of liked Eric Davis and Barry Larkin back in the early days of the Reds.
I'll tell you what, if we get J.D. Vance as vice president and then the Bengals win the Super Bowl, I think that
You're going to retire.
You're done.
Off to Key West he goes.
That's all we need.
He's going to gone fishing.
Tiki hut and a Key West rum drink. Oh, my gosh. Well, fellas, listen, I think that there's an awful lot that we can have as a summation of our first day. High energy.
High energy.
Whatever you thought the events of the last 48 hours would do to diminish that energy, don't pay attention to, because it ain't true. Mm-hmm. People are really, really excited. You've got a whole young, diverse generation of Republicans coming together in a unified message. You have a resolute, resilient President Trump, defiant in many ways. Probably the best part of his game that I've seen forever. Obviously, nobody would wish any of these events that he's had to go through. but the way he's handled it and the way he's popped out the other side has been just incredible.
Everything. I mean, from top to bottom, from the beginning, all the aspersions cast against him. And oh my God, this guy's a tyrant. He's going to end democracy. All the lawfare, and then one after the other, he's beaten it all. And just in that moment of just raising his fist in defiance, telling him fight.
Yeah.
That spirit is. It's you can feel it in the air.
Just like in the debate, a few weeks ago. It feels like millennia ago now, but it was just 3 weeks ago. Just as that debate exposed the weakness of Joe Biden, I'm hoping this week can reveal the strength of Donald Trump and our Republican Party. We need the American people to hear the message that's here in this room the next 4 days, and here on the show, we're happy to bring it to you.
Yeah.
Michael, I think they're going to hear it because I think they're hungry for something different from what they see in the White House right now. And that is exactly what President Trump is offering. They're giving him a new look. These suburban voters who weren't so sure about him in 2020 are giving him a new look. And if you look at sort of the initial snap polls right after the debate, right after Joe Biden's horrible performance in the press conference and everything else, you know that they're giving President Trump another look, and all week we're going to see exactly what he's offering.
Well, that is, John, that's the story of America, right? I mean, it's not about having one leader all the time. It's about having the right leader at the right time. That's right. And I think whatever President Trump's cup of tea was in terms of you as a voter, whether you were a steadfast supporter or whether you were somewhere in between as a conservative, you have to admit this is the right time.
Yeah.
And this is the right moment. And you've seen an incredible galvanizing of support from places in the party that you never suspected. And if you'd have told me that 2 years ago, I would have thought you were crazy. But now, looking at this, looking at the energy, looking at all the guests we've had and will have over the next 4 days, I can't help but be super excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Like the stream, share this with your friends. We're going to be here. We're going to be coming to you here every single day of this convention. So please spread the word.
Yeah, we'll do it. Like and subscribe. Do some, comments.
Yeah.
Let us know about your thoughts on JD.
We should read some tomorrow. We should read some of the comments tomorrow.
We'll read some comments and maybe we'll do a live thing. Maybe we'll get crazy here.
Yeah.
Right? Why not? Let's have too much to drink and make bad decisions. For you and for us, thank you so much for joining us and welcoming us into your home here in Milwaukee. We're the Ruthless Variety Program. I think we did it, Smug.
I think so. Absolute banger of an episode. Gentlemen, thank you so much, Senator Cornyn. Thank you so much, Senator Thune. Thank you so much, Governor Youngkin. And thank you to the minions. We will see you soon.